She pressed her back to the corral rail and felt a splinter-punch skin. A roan stallion hammered the pen, breath like steam. Rope sang. A big man stepped into dust with his palm raised. Easy, boy. Iron shoes sparked. Nora Pike flinched and kept her right cheek turned. Habit from the pale scar that lived there since the boarding house fire when she was 8. In town, eyes measured. Out here, the sky didn't ask questions. She'd cut across Haviland Ranch to deliver a blue-sealed letter. Wire clicked in the cold. Coffee smelled burnt from the bunkhouse. The big man moved like a barn built not to block light. When the roan lunged, he slid a hand to its neck, a touch light as breath. The animal blew and stilled, surprised by gentleness. "You lost?" he asked behind Nora. Hat low, lines at his mouth that said he'd laughed and swallowed plenty. "Mail," she said, holding the letter away from her face. "Foreman?" "Mrs. Haviland." A shadow crossed the White House windows like a pale cloud. "Name's Calder Reed," he said. "I coax horses into remembering manners." He handed the letter back. "Best you give it to her. News hits softer when spoken soft." Nora knocked. Charity Haviland, iron grey and iron-backed, slit the seal, read, and let her shoulders sag. Mercy. She nodded thanks, then closed the door on whatever mercy the letter lacked. Back at the fence, Calder stood in the horse's breath. "He throws anyone who grabs hard," he said. "I wouldn't know." "Wouldn't you?" he murmured, and heat climbed Nora's neck. She shifted, the splinter bit deeper. He noticed. "Hold still." He waited for her nod, then pinched the wood free with big, careful fingers. Her right eye watered. She angled the scar away, bracing for flinch or pity. He did neither. He simply lifted his hat and fanned her cheek dry. Winds sharp. The cookhouse leaked onion warmth. Nora meant to leave. Instead, she ate stew at a dented tin table while Calder passed behind, his unseen laugh warm when she fished a bay leaf from her tongue. He set a square biscuit by her bowl. "Eat. Long walk back." "Ride," she said. "Mare's at the depot. Then I'll walk you to the cottonwoods. Men in town been too interested in sacks they wish were coin." She knew the pair, Leif Jory and his brother Walt. Bad hair and worse morals. They took the creek path. Frost crisped. Nests like black bowls clung to branches. Calder didn't crowd silence. It let Nora keep what she wanted and set the rest down for a while. At the trees, he stopped. "You all right, the rest?" "I manage." "I believe you." He said her name like he'd known it. Nora Pike. "Swing by tomorrow. If that letter means selling horses, I'll need a hand getting the good ones through." "I don't know horses. You know quiet. Quiet keeps animals sane." She turned toward the road. Didn't see the man peel from the shed, hat low, eyes on her mail satchel. Fingers jerked the strap. The bag tore. Letters burst like quail. She hit her knees. A boot pressed her back. Breath fled. "Where's the payroll?" Walt's wolf-yellow grin hovered. Calder's shout slammed the world. He ran fast for a big man. The weight left Nora. She rolled, grabbed envelopes with numb fingers. Calder's shadow fell across Walt. He didn't draw. He lifted Walt by the coat like laundry on a line. "That your letter?" he asked Nora. "Yes. 2 choices, Calder told Walt. "Run or apologize honest." Walt spat and ran. Nora gathered mail, shaking. Calder crouched between her and the world and passed letters like a doctor passing instruments. His eyes were the color of river stones. "You all right?" "Fine." The lie sounded practiced. "You're not. You will be." His hand hovered, then rested light on her shoulder. "Come back tomorrow. I'll meet you at the depot." She surprised herself. "All right." From the shed's shadow, Leif watched, jaw working. His hand tapped the pistol at his hip. His smile thinned like wire. Nora lingered after stew, pretending to study the wall calendar as men clattered bowls. The bunkhouse smelled of damp wool and soap shaved thin. A harmonica tried a hymn and failed. Someone laughed soft so the player wouldn't feel it. Calder rinsed his bowl, sleeves pushed, forearms nicked with old wire bites. He dried his hands slow, as if hurrying broke plates. When she tugged her gloves on, he tipped his hat without ceremony and fell into step like that had always been their habit. They passed the blacksmith, the anvil holding a white pebble of snow that wouldn't melt. Two colts watched them with wet, painted eyes. "You always cut across alone?" he asked. "Alone is quieter." "Sometimes," he said. "Sometimes two quiets make a better quiet." He didn't look at her when he said it, which made it easier to hear. At the creek, she paused. Ice clung to roots like glass lace. She wanted to say thank you. The word felt too small. "I'll bring coffee tomorrow," she tried instead. "I won't argue with Mercy," he said. "Bring the tin kind." She did, and the next morning she wore her hair tucked forward, a veil she trusted more than people. When he saw the thermos, he grinned from one side as if it surprised him every time the world was kind. He handed her a lead. "Walk by his shoulder," he said of the roan. "Don't stare at his eyes. Give him a place to put his fear that isn't your hands." She nodded and stepped into the circle of breath. The horse startled, then studied her. She kept the rope loose. After a minute, its ears breathed toward her like flowers turning. She didn't notice Leif drift along the fence, measuring what mattered to other people and hating it for that reason alone. He flicked ash and smiled a little to himself. After stew, a boy from the Remuda shyly offered her a cinnamon stick. She tucked it in her glove for the smell. When Walt's boot hit, pain rang like iron. Letters flew, Dr. Bill, seed catalogue, a note in a careful hand. "Dear Pa." Nora clawed for them as if paper could hold the world steady. Calder arrived with a sound that lifted birds out of trees. He didn't punch. He set Walt against the idea of consequence. Walt ran because cowards love open ground. Nora kept gathering. Frost bit her fingertips. Calder's shadow made a tent for her to work under. When she stood, the creek was talking in its winter voice. Thin, glassy, persistent. She breathed with it until her chest remembered how. She and Calder stood a moment longer beneath the cottonwoods, listening to ice tick against roots and a far heifer call once, mournful and ordinary. The world kept moving, her breath steadied to match it. When she finally spoke, her voice surprised her by sounding like it belonged. Days stacked like split wood. Nora kept coming, drawn by a promise she hadn't meant to make, and by the way, Calder walked beside silence without crushing it. They talked fence wire and weather. He showed her how to hold a lead so it wouldn't cut when a horse remembered fear. She brought coffee in her father's battered thermos. He said it tasted like tin and gratitude. Once he laughed, and it rumbled like a wagon over a cattle guard. Once she laughed and surprised herself. Trust arrived like frost melting, patch by patch. Calder dragged a hay bale to a windless corner for her noon biscuit. When sleet worried the ridge, she wore his coat. It smelled of saddle soap and smoke. "Keep it," he said. She wore it through town, and for 3 alleys didn't hide the scar. They gentled 2 geldings due for sale. "Don't push," he'd murmur. "Invite." He never touched her without asking. Once he asked to see a rope burn, turned her palm like a page, and traced the red line with his eyes instead of fingers. "You're learning," he said, and something warmed in her like a stove. Leif and Walt watched the depot, guessing which sacks held coin. "Afternoon, Scar Girl," Leif sang. Nora saved words. Calder met her a block early and took up space like a wall. Snow started honest. They worked a bay in the round pen. "You drive him," Calder said. Nora kept her shoulders loose, swung the line and waited. The bay slowed, licked, turned to face her, choosing stillness because she offered it. "That," Calder said, pride like heat, "that's the trick." A deputy rode in. Harmon, badge crooked, smile without warmth. "You Calder Reed?" "Depends who's asking." "Mrs. Havlin asked about a missing payroll pouch." His eyes slid to Nora. "You? Face like that, see a lot from corners." Calder's jaw ticked. "Watch your mouth." Nora lifted her chin. "He helped me pick up mail Walt scattered. That's all." "Huh." Harmon looked bored by truth. "I'll be around." He shoulder-brushed Calder's hat as he left. The air gained edges. Someone left a dead Phoebe on the depot steps, wings spread like a pinned prayer. Leif hummed outside Nora's boarding house at odd hours. Charity Havlin said, practical as frost, "Stay in the spare room while this blows over." Nora nearly refused, then felt Calder's coat heavy on her shoulders and said, "All right." Nights bent close. Wind sang thin in the chimney. Nora slept with a knife in the nightstand, because caution doesn't unlearn easy. She woke from a smoke dream with her heart thrashing and her cheek tight as paper. Morning found her at the stove. Calder poured coffee, didn't mention the moons under her eyes. "You sleep?" he asked. "Enough." He watched the flame. "I don't sleep straight since the war." Loud, then wrong quiet. Shiloh, some other names not worth keeping. He flexed his left hand, the one with a pale seam. "I wasn't brave." "I was there." She set her mug down. "I was 8, boarding house, drunk knocked a lamp. We made it out, me and Ma. My brother didn't. Folks said be glad. Glad didn't fit, so I learned small and quiet." Calder didn't reach over the line they'd set, but his voice did. "You didn't pick that scar, you carried it. You didn't fail him." She slid her hand over his on the table. It fit like a thing finally finding its place. "I don't know how to be looked at without hiding," she whispered. "I don't hide with you." "Then don't," he said. She kissed his cheek, quick as a match. His eyes darkened like deep water. The next day, Harmon came back with 3 men, Leif neat beside him, Walt grinning. "Time to search," the deputy said. "Anonymous letter says check Reed's tack room." He shouldered past Nora, went straight to a burlap sack hidden too clean, and shook coin. Walt whooped. Leif smiled like a door closing. "Wasn't there this morning," Calder said. "Then a miracle," Harmon answered. "Reed, you're under arrest." Iron closed on Calder's wrists. Nora's vision went white at the edges. She caught Leif's eyes. He watched her like a boy over ants and sunlight. As they led Calder past, he found her. "Trust the quiet," he said, the same calm he used on horses. It steadied her more than any speech. They hauled him toward town through falling snow. Nora stood until her coat glazed white, then went to Charity's desk and began to write. Names, hours, corners where Leif loitered, how Walt couldn't stop touching the pocket where lies live. She wrote a plan that scared her because it asked to be seen. By morning, men on horseback were searching every ranch within 50 miles, and the jail had a new lock shining like a silver tooth. Days made small stories. A chicken with dramatic opinions pecked Nora's boot and she yelped. Calder laughed until he had to brace a hand on the doorframe. She brought him a scarf she'd traded for 2 stamps, and he wore it so long the fringe smelled like horses. Charity handed Nora a mended pair of wool mitts without comment, and Nora said thank you like a person who remembers how to receive. In town, 2 girls stared at Nora's scar, whispering. One's mother tapped the girl's knuckles and said, "Don't be common," which landed in Nora like a kind stone. Winter tightened. The bay balked in the pen, until Nora learned to breathe before she asked. Then the gelding followed her shoulder like a thought. Calder lit a lamp for her at dusk beside a chair that didn't wobble. He carved her name small on the handle of a curry comb and pretended he hadn't. Trust grew like that. In the edges men tend to miss. Deputy Harmon returned with papers that looked official and language that wasn't. Charity read the words, lips thin. "This says probable." "Probable isn't proof," Nora said, shocking herself. Harmon heard it. His eyes cooled. "You folks think you're lawyers now." He rode off with his badge straighter than the first time. Late that night, wind paling the window, Nora told Calder about the fire because she couldn't stand it being only hers anymore. "I let go of my brother's hand," she said steady, "to fetch water. I came back to a roar." Calder's breath left heavy. "You were a child." "I'm the one who let go." "You're the one who ran back," he answered, and set his hand near hers on the table. Close enough to warm, far enough to ask. She bridged the distance. The room felt larger with truth in it. When Harmon staged the tackroom miracle, Charity swore like a dust devil. One ranch hand moved, but Calder shook his head once. Nora wanted to scratch Leif's smile from his face. Instead she stood so still, her bones hummed. As the irons closed, Calder found her eyes. "Trust the quiet," he said again, the rope gentler speaking to a wild minute. She did. She went to the desk and built a case out of names and corners, and hours like stacking fence posts until shade appeared. She ran toward the fire. Before Thor, Nora braided her hair back from the scar and pinned it with a cheap comb that felt like stepping out without a roof. Knife to calf, father's thermos, and a coil of fence wire in the satchel. 2 envelopes with Pride at seals tucked in the lining, nails in her pocket. Calder's coat over everything like a promise. At the jail porch, Harmon rocked, pleased with order. Leif leaned neat at the rail. Walt snored under the eave. Nora climbed the steps. "I'm giving a statement." "Later," Harmon said. "Now." She pushed inside. Damp stone, old smoke. Calder on a bench in the cell, hands loose between his knees. He lifted his head, and something in his face softened and straightened at once. "You don't have to," he said. "I know. I'm doing it." She set facts on the desk like fence posts. Walt's boot on her back, Leif's depot vigils, the snowy anonymous letter that knew the right shelf. She slid the 2 tampered seal letters forward, opened before delivery. "You accusing me?" Harmon's smile thinned. "Pointing at the ditch, you choose whether to fall." Her voice didn't shake. That felt like finding a new trail out of country she'd been lost in. Charity Havlin filled the doorway with 3 ranchers who owed her. She laid bright coins on the desk. "From the bank's latest batch. Leif paid my cook with these last night." Walt wandered in, eager and foolish. "Leif told me stash the sack behind Reed's tack," he blurted. "Said the deputy was a friend." Silence, clean as a church before the hymn. Leif's hand flashed to his gun. Nora moved first, nails in his face. He blinked, cursed, short sentences now. The gun skittered. Harmon grabbed it. Calder braced a boot, wrenched the lock. The hasp screamed. He hit Leif like a falling gate. Leif's knife flashed. Calder caught his wrist. The blade nicked Nora's coat. She looped wire, twist again, and bound Leif to a chair leg. He spat mean words meant for women. This time people stopped him. Harmon stood with a gun and a new expression. Calculation. "More involved than I thought," he said to the room, as if he hadn't helped. "We'll process them both." "You'll process yourself," Charity said, nodding toward the window where townsfolk gathered, and the preacher who liked order more than sermons. "We're watching." Harmon swallowed his threat, cuffed Leif and Walt, and unlocked the cells like admitting his house had mice. Calder stepped out, not gloating, just breathing bigger now that the room had air. Outside, Thor lightened the sky. Wind lifted her hair. She didn't cover the scar. A woman raised a small salute. "Thank you," Calder said, the kind of thanks that braids itself into a life. "You risked yourself." She looked at him full on. "I chose you. I'll keep choosing you." He exhaled like a stump, finally set down. "Then I'll do the living part with you." His hand rose. A question. She answered by stepping into it. He cupped her jaw like it wasn't made of fault and kissed her, "Careful the way you lay the first board level." They didn't marry that week. They testified. Harmon left 3 months later under someone else's badge, chewing pride. Leif went where bars are thick. Walt went where the air is thin. Charity kept her ranch by selling horses she could part with. She gave Calder an old bunkhouse to fix and told him to make a life if he could. Spring followed Thor like truth follows patience. Grass pushed through last year's lies. Nora moved a trunk into the bunkhouse because Calder had planed the table smooth and set a nail for her thermos as if it were an heirloom. She stayed on the mail road because a woman doesn't need to hand over everything to join. She came home to Calder humming out of tune and beans that tasted better because the man burning them loved her. "I used to count the ways people didn't look at me," she told him one evening when frogs began. "Now I count fence posts." "Fence posts don't judge," he said. "Dust doesn't," she answered, and they smiled at the same thought. Autumn stacked hay in squares. Calder set a horseshoe nail ring on the table. "I want to live as your husband." She laid her palm over his. "Then I'll live as your wife." They married under the cottonwoods. The preacher kept it brief. Calder kissed Nora with both hands on her face. The town saw the scar, and for once saw what he saw. Months later, the bunkhouse had a porch and a squeaky rocker with a bright traded quilt. Seeds waited for spring in a box by the window. Nora touched her belly sometimes, not counting, just breathing. The knife still lived in the nightstand because the world stays itself, but she slept more. and dreamed less. One evening, river low, sky in a peach shawl, they walked to the bank with 2 tin cups and the thermos. Cottonwoods rattled, frogs rehearsed. Calder sat and pulled her between his knees, chin in the warm place where neck meets shoulder. The scar rested against his jaw, and neither moved to hide it. "I tried to be smaller than my skin," she said. "I'd only have to find the rest of you," he answered. They watched the water take the last light. Upstream, a heron lifted awkward wings and turned effort into grace. Together, they watched the river drift under dusk until the first stars blinked on. If this story settled into your chest, if quiet bravery and chosen love felt like a campfire finally catching, subscribe for more desert legends of forbidden romance, steady courage, and new lives built out of old scars. Word moved quicker than weather. By the time Nora finished speaking in the jail, 2 shopkeepers and the blacksmith stood on the porch, pretending not to listen. The preacher stepped inside and folded his hands like a door latch. He didn't say scripture. He said, "Truth likes witnesses." Inside the cell, Calder had blood on one knuckle where iron bit him. He watched her gather herself between sentences as if each breath was a colt that needed inviting. After Harmon cuffed Leif and Walt, he tried to sneer his power back into place. "You'll regret crossing me." "Maybe," Nora said, "but not today." They stepped into a morning that smelled like thaw and smoke. Calder's palm found her shoulder blade as if checking a saddle sat right, not claiming, confirming. He shivered once, spent, and then grinned, small and real. "You run toward fires," he said. "I do now," she answered. Spring brought mud and calves. Nora kept the mail road, but the bunkhouse felt like a word the tongue learns and doesn't want to stop saying. Calder planed the table smooth. Sand rasped like rain on tin. He set 2 hooks by the door, one for his hat, one for her thermos. At night, she sometimes expected smoke. Instead, she heard his breathing and matched it. Come autumn, when he set the horseshoe nail ring on the table, his hands shook once. She steadied them with hers. Charity cried in private, which Nora pretended not to notice. The wedding under the cottonwoods was brief. The kiss was not. Town gossip ran out of air. Winter found them counting fence posts and stars. One evening, the river ran low, and the sky wore a peach shawl. They took tin cups and the old thermos to the bank. She leaned back into him, scar against his jaw, and let the day's noise walk itself out along the water. Upstream, a heron lifted, awkward into grace. They watched light go soft as a promise, and knew they'd been given the rarest thing, a life that made room.